So the stand for the Ghost looks like this. It's kind of a simple design that rests up underneath the Ghost, supports it, and we're going to build that. So I've got, it's best if, this looks best if it's made out of black paper like this. So when you go to print out the parts, what I recommend doing is there's three main parts to the base. There's the stand, there's the top piece that gets folded, and then there's the bottom hexagon that covers that up. And those are the three pieces that need to be made out of black paper. So what I recommend is there's those are on three different sheets, or two different sheets here. And I recommend that you print this on just plain copy paper, and then we'll just use some spray adhesive on the back, and we'll attach that to some black paper and just use it as a template to score the lines and cut it out. And then we'll just fold it up with the, if the bond on the paper is strong enough that if you try to remove it, it's just going to damage the paper, start tearing it up, then you can just leave it in place and go ahead and just make your fold so that the template, white paper of the template just ends up on the inside of the model, so you can't see it. But if your bond is weak, the bond between the the spray adhesive bond between the white paper and the black paper is weak, then and you can just take it off, then go ahead and do that, just because we are going to be gluing things to that, and if that's a weak bond, then it might fall apart. So you'll just have to judge after you get these parts cut and folded, and before you close it all up. Now there are two other parts that go to this base. There's some reinforcement that goes inside. There's this piece here that goes inside of this stand, and so this long edge here actually goes up here. I don't remember if it actually goes all the way to the top or not. We'll have to see when we get in there, but really that little cut in right there goes and fits inside this little cut in there. And then so that reinforces and strengthens this part up here. But then also, in order to keep this, when you put some weight on it, to keep it just from collapsing down in, we're also going to build a hexagonal shaped box out of this piece here. So you just score it, cut it, fold the tabs, and then on each of these just bend it around into a hexagon shape that will fit up inside. We'll glue it to the bottom of this top piece, so inside, and then it's the same height as what you should get there. And so when we glue the bottom piece on, it'll glue to the glue tabs of the top piece and the bottom glue tabs of the internal support, and then that gives it enough structure to support the Ghost without flexing at all. So this page here, I recommend you print this on cardstock, because we are going to reinforce this. I recommend that we reinforce this with some of this thick chipboard, which is just like a really thick cardstock, and we'll just cut out basically just enough to cover the shape here, and that just gives it some vertical rigidity, so it doesn't tend to buckle or collapse when you put some weight on it. But we're going to glue those strips of chipboard onto there, and without glue tabs. We're not going to cut glue tabs out of this, so really we're just going to cut like this shape, this rectangle, or maybe like 2 or 3 of them. We'll see. We might just cut one long strip and then fold it, but we're going to cut it without glue tabs, right? So we would only cut it this wide, and then that way we'll glue the strip that we cut out of the chipboard to this piece that we're going to cut out of the cardstock, and then we're going to go ahead and fold and use the glue tabs that are on here to hold it together and mount it into the stand itself. So that's why I recommend you print this on cardstock, because we're going to be utilizing those glue tabs, and they just will be a little bit stronger than if you print that on the thinner copy paper. And we're going to reinforce both of these parts, so we'll do chipboard for that as well. So first we are going to need to put some spray adhesive on here and use some black paper. I've got a couple scraps here that I'm going to reuse. You can see this is from leftover from when I built this one. Cut that piece out. Okay, I'm going to go spray some of this spray adhesive on the back of these papers. All right, so put spray adhesive on the back. All right, so I did take the template off of this one because this is the one that I had unstuck a couple of times to kind of move it around to get everything to fit. So I wasn't confident that that bond was really going to hold very well, and it did come off mostly without pulling up any paper. There was just a couple little patches where it came up. So this will obviously be the inside surface, so I've marked it. I've written inside on there just so I don't forget and accidentally put that on the outside. Although I guess this is the bottom of the base, so it doesn't matter if it's too pretty. But for this one, I tried to pull the paper up to see how well it was going to come up, and it was holding pretty strong. So I decided to go ahead and leave the template on here for these two, and I just kind of, in order to get them to stick on as well as I could, I just got my bottle of spray adhesive and just kind of steamrolled over these just to get that bond as good as we can get. And yeah, so now we just got to fold this up. These are all I do want to pay attention to the direction of the folds, of course, because I do want to make sure that this is inside. So I'm going to be folding these are all going to be valley folds on here. Or normally, I think the template kind of has these, let's look at this one. You can see the difference. So some of these have like just like a regular dashed line, and some of these have like a dash dot pattern. And that's to distinguish between mountain and valley folds. And for the rest of the model, if you look at the bend lines on those, the dashed line represents a mountain fold, and the dash dot line represents a valley fold. But we're going to want to flip these around, because normally the pattern that you print on your paper shows the outside of the model, and you're going to fold everything inward, right? But in this case, it's going to be the inside of the model, because we want the back, the black part, to be the outside. So we're going to reverse all those folds. For these ones, they're all going to be the same. They're all valley folds. These ones, there's a couple that are different, so we'll have to pay attention when we're folding that. All right, so before we close this piece up, we're going to want to create the internal support, and we're going to cut some chipboard to match that. So just to match the part, not including the glue flaps, the glue flaps will just be the cardstock, but the chipboard will be the basic shape. So let's go ahead and cut. We'll score and fold this, or score and cut this out, and then I'll use it to kind of mark on the chipboard where that's going to go. Okay, so I'm going to just use the edges of this to mark the shape of this internal support, and I've got a long straight edge, the original edge of this piece of chipboard. I'll just go ahead and use that, make use of it, so one less edge to cut and mark. If I end up cutting right on that marked edge, I don't know if you can see that on the camera, if I cut right on that marked edge, I think the chipboard will end up being a little bit bigger than this piece here, so it might not fit inside there correct. So I'm just going to go in just a little bit, I don't know, a millimeter, half a millimeter, just to give it a little extra clearance, because the chipboard doesn't actually have to go all the way up next to it. Really what this is doing is it's providing some vertical stabilization, reinforcement, and also kind of keeping the shape from kind of squishing down. So most of its strength is kind of in the plane of the piece. And the reason that, I mean, this alone would provide some support, but as you can see, it tends to buckle pretty easily. But I think reinforcing it with this chipboard is just going to give that just the extra bit of strength that it needs. All right, so let's glue this. Now, I don't want to use, you could use spray adhesive on this. I don't like using it because it's messy unless I have to. But I don't think I want to use my normal Papercraft glue for that, because that, if I just put a whole bunch of it on there, that's going to warp like what happened with this eye. So I'm just going to use super glue because that doesn't tend to warp as much, doesn't have as much moisture content, and it just seems to work just fine. I think there might be some interference with the corner of this tab up inside of that corner back in there. So I'm going to cut this down a little bit on both sides. Okay, so as you can see, there is a little bit of a gap there. If I shine some light behind there, you can see that. So that's good to know. So if you're a little, you don't have to be too careful about cutting that edge, or worrying about whether this lines up perfectly. It's not designed to actually contact that edge. It's more just the real work is being done by these sides here. Now I do want this to be straight up and down, so this is the middle here. So if I line it up with that edge, that should be good, but I want to be able to just mark where the middle is here so I can line it up there easily. So let's find the middle. Wow, that's almost exactly 60 millimeters right there. So let's just mark 30. Do the same on the other side. And then just for measure, yeah, it looks to be about 36. Oh, 37 more. So 18 and a half. And then I'll just make a line between those two marks. Okay, yeah, and I don't have to be like perfectly exact, just as long as it's not too crooked, then we'll know it's not deforming it, making it take a weird shape, and it's supporting it like it's supposed to. Okay, so let's see, order of operations here. I'm going to have to glue that in first. So I might just have to put glue on all 4 of those tabs and then fold it up and get it lined up and hold it in place. I think that'll end up working just fine because this seems to close up nicely once that's taken its shape. So let's do that. I do want to make sure that these corners are pushed as far in as they'll go. Okay, that seemed to line it up on the bottom pretty well. All right, so while that's, I'm going to hold on to that while that dries a little longer. Just don't want it to spread apart. It naturally wants to do that just because of the springiness of the material. So I'll hang on to that while that dries a little further. So the last piece we need to build here is going to be this hexagon support. And so really this is just like a, this glue tab. Oh, sorry, you can't see that. This glue tab here is going to wrap around and glue to that end there. So I mean it's like a ring, but instead of a circle, it's bent in flat segments, 6 sides hexagon. So we're also going to want to reinforce this with chipboard because this really is providing the support so that this portion of the base doesn't collapse. So really it's directly holding the weight of the entire Ghost assembly. So so I think, yeah, what we'll want to reinforce that with some chipboard. I was just thinking you might be able to get away with it because once you've got it folded up into a ring, it ought to be pretty decently strong. But let's not take any chances. I know that this prototype is reinforced and it is nice and sturdy. I don't have any issues with that, so I'm not going to take a chance. I'm going to go ahead and reinforce that. And just like with this, we're going to just use the glue tabs on the cardstock piece here, and we're just going to add chipboard to the internal rectangles. I could probably just add one big strip. Those bends, I might have to split or score the chipboard so that it bends more easily right there, because this stuff is really thick. But I don't think I need to make it in separate pieces. I think that'll be too much hassle. Not really worth the effort. So, okay, time to put that down. I look at it, it looks a little crooked, but I think I can adjust that when we go to fold this flap down. Got some play in that. I don't know. Anyway. I think we want these flaps to be folded outside of the hexagon as it's rolled up. So yeah, so if you just follow these, you do those as mountain folds, those as valley, or vice versa. Either would work as long as they're not both the same. So I think this will be easier to bend if the chipboard's on the outside, and we'll have to bend it this way rather than bending in on itself. I think that might put too much shear stress on the glue interface. Because this way, if it's not wanting to bend that thick material, I can just slightly score the outer surface of that, and then it'll kind of just tend to split away from itself. So, again, going to use some super glue because less moisture content, it's less likely to warp and deform. So I just did the opposite of what I said I was going to do. I just put that on the inside. Okay. Well, jeez. All right, I'm just going to fold these tabs throughout the other direction. And the inside becomes the outside, just like that. Alright, so let's see if we can bend these without too much trouble, or if we're going to have to, might help to just do a light scoring on these. Yeah. So if you can see that, outer layer of this chipboard just split down the middle, which is pretty much what I wanted. That way it's not trying to there's not too much internal stress in the material. It's just going to hold its form nicely, because really what we're looking for is strength in this direction. So that little slightly thinner part there is not going to be an issue for that. So I was thinking I might have to do it with my knife just to cut that outer surface, but just lightly scoring it with my little pick tool seems to be good enough. It just presses in on that material, weakens it just enough that when I put stress on it, it splits right along that line. From this height, I'm having trouble knowing if I'm actually right on that joint. So I lined up the bottom of this part with the line on my cutting mat. That way I can see it. I can at least get eyeball. I can eyeball how perpendicular it is. And that seems to be doing pretty good. So it wouldn't be the end of the world if they weren't perfectly straight, but perfectly parallel to the bend lines. But every little bit helps. One less thing to have to fight. Okay. Alright, so just carefully bend that, make sure it's going to split the way I want. Bring that up here so you can maybe see that in action. Here we go. There's one. There we go. I'm really only just pushing it as far as it needs to go. I don't have to go any further than that. So, all right. Okay. So there's the last piece of a stand that we need to prep. Finish folding this guy. Get him glued up. Then we'll install the rest. Okay, so the idea again, like I said, is these flaps have to go through the square hole, square cutout on here. And let's see, I don't suppose it really matters which way it goes. Either that way or that way. I mean, they're not the same, right? In this case, the line split down here is perpendicular to the side. So this will be, so the ghost will go on this way. So I guess just if you have a preference, whether the base is oriented with the hexagon with the point forward, or with the points to the side. Structurally, that's not going to matter. It'll support it just fine either way. It's just if you have a preference on the appearance, then you get to choose. Let's see, what did I do on the prototype? So I did the point forward on the prototype. Let's do this one different, just for fun. Okay, so we're going to make sure where those flaps go inside. We don't want to glue the flaps to the outside because that'd just be ugly. So we want the flaps to go inside, which is a little tricky, trying to get those through there, especially these ones that naturally, I mean, they need to be a valley fold, but I'm going to have to temporarily mountain fold them just to get them through the hole. I gave a little bit of clearance. I cut that hole a little bit bigger than the actual assembled piece should be, but not much. So now that the flaps are through, we just valley fold them back to the way we had before, and then they're going to glue up to the underside of this piece here. Now these two don't bend much, so they're nice and easy. These ones though, that is a sharp bend and they don't really want to bend that far, so you gotta coax them. Okay, so now that's in there, guess you might as well go ahead and glue them. We can fold these up after the fact. As you can see, I wasn't too careful, and when I was gluing these edges I got little spots of glue. You'll want to definitely be more careful than I was. I might be able to go and clean that up with some tweezers, see if I can scrape some of that glue off, but you don't want to scrape too much because then you make a little shiny spot, so I'll have to clean that up. So yeah, just let that be a warning to you when you're putting it together. Just be careful when you're gluing to not get it all over the place. Normally the clear glue doesn't show up against light colored things, but on the black it really stands out. Okay, let's get this internal support glued in, and you just kind of want to more or less center it on there. I mean, it doesn't have to be exact in any way at all. In fact, you can see I've got the hexagon point up, but this one's point to the side, so you can either do that or turn it so that the points align. Doesn't really matter. Yeah, it's not going to make any difference. So okay, this part is going to be a little tricky just to get it straight on there. I think what I might do is pick one of these flaps that has like a decent edge. Maybe that one. And then I'll glue it to that edge first. And then once that's dried, I can fold it down. That'll at least keep it from skewing too much. Oh, I do have to remember to put glue there. I mean, I guess I don't have to. It's not like that's going anywhere. But might keep it from being puffy if it's glued in the middle. Keep it from puffing up like that. Okay, so that is holding nicely. Not perfectly straight, but from the top you can't tell. So, all right, all we got to do is glue these last 4 edges. Just do it 2 at a time. All right, there's the stand. Let's see if it works. Perfect.